The restaurant was full that night. Every table occupied, every glass filled, every conversation polished and careful, the way conversations always are when powerful people gather in expensive rooms. The chandeliers above cast everything in warm amber light, and the piano in the corner played something soft and classical that nobody was actually listening to. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, New York City hummed and glared the way it always does, indifferent, magnificent, completely unaware of what was about to happen inside. Noah Carter was carrying a tray of water glasses when he felt it. Not heard it, not saw it, felt it, somewhere deep in the part of him that had been paying attention to danger since he was 19 years old, and the world had suddenly become a place with very sharp edges. He stopped walking, just for a second, just long enough for his eyes to move slowly across the room the way they always did, the way they had trained themselves to do without him ever meaning to train them. And that was when he saw the man sitting near the south wall. His wine was untouched. His jacket sat wrong across his shoulders, too large, too deliberate, and his eyes were not on the room, not on his phone, not on anyone at the tables around him. They were fixed on the window, on the street beyond it, on something outside in the darkness that nobody else in that warm, glowing, laughing room had any reason to look for. Noah's tray lowered almost imperceptibly. His breathing slowed. Across the room at table 14 near the west window sat Jonathan Hale, 61 years old, silver-haired, one of the most recognized men in American business, a man who had built 3 companies from nothing, funded hospitals, reshaped industries with quiet, relentless intelligence. He was sitting alone, as he apparently preferred, a small leather notebook open beside his untouched mineral water. He looked composed, unhurried, completely unaware. Noah's eyes moved to the window behind him. And then he saw it. For less than a heartbeat, less than a single blinking fraction of a second, a faint red dot appeared in the reflection of the glass wall to his left. Barely visible, almost nothing. A ghost of light swallowed almost instantly by the amber glow of the chandeliers. But it was moving, slowly, deliberately, settling onto the chest of Jonathan Hale. Noah did not think. There was no time for thinking. Thinking was a luxury that belonged to people who were already safe, and Noah Carter had never been that person. He set the tray down, not dropped it, set it with the ingrained habit of a man who had carried other people's things carefully his entire life, and he moved. 5 strides, maybe 6. He crossed the dining room in absolute silence, weaving between chairs and guests who didn't look up, who didn't notice, who were mid-sentence and mid-laugh and mid-sip. He lowered his shoulder in the final step and drove every ounce of his weight into the side of Jonathan Hale's chair. The crack that followed was enormous. The window did not simply break, it exploded, a single violent percussion that sent glass raining across the nearest tables in a glittering, terrible cascade. The bullet that had been traveling toward Jonathan Hale's chest buried itself instead into the plaster wall 4 feet above the floor, leaving a small dark hole in the paint that nobody would fully process until after the screaming had stopped. Because then the screaming started. The room came apart in an instant. Guests scrambled from their chairs. A woman near the entrance fell against the wall. The piano stopped. Glasses shattered on the floor. Security personnel materialized from corners of the room where they had been standing so still they had been invisible. Their radios already live, their voices sharp and controlled in the middle of the chaos. On the marble floor, Noah Carter lay beside Jonathan Hale. He was breathing hard. His uniform jacket was torn at the shoulder. A thin cut on his forearm from a sliver of glass was beginning to bleed slowly through the white fabric. He pressed his palm flat against the cold floor and pushed himself up just enough to look at the man beside him. Hale had not moved. He was lying completely still, his eyes open, staring at the ceiling with the expression of a man who has just understood something very large and very sudden all at once. Then he turned his head, and for the first time that entire evening, the first time, perhaps in the 2 years Noah had worked in that restaurant, Jonathan Hale truly looked at him. Not through him, not past him, at him. "Are you hurt?" Hale asked. His voice was quieter than Noah had expected, steadier. "No, sir," Noah said. "Are you?" Hale exhaled slowly. "No," he said. "I don't believe I am." They lay there on the cold marble for another moment, surrounded by the sound of the room unraveling around them, and something passed between them that neither man could have named precisely, a recognition, a stillness inside the chaos. Then the security team reached them, and the moment was over. The investigation consumed the next 4 hours. The man near the south wall was apprehended 2 blocks from the restaurant. The details of who had sent him and why were grim and complicated and belonged to the kind of world that most people only read about. Statements were taken. Officers moved through the space with quiet efficiency. The restaurant emptied, table by table, until only a few remained. Noah sat alone in a side room near the kitchen, his torn jacket folded across his knees, waiting for his turn to speak to the detective. He was not thinking about what had happened. He was thinking about Emma, about whether she had eaten dinner yet, about whether the heating in their apartment was holding, or whether the old radiator had started clicking again the way it did every October. He was thinking about a box of medical textbooks pushed under her bed, untouched for 4 years. The door opened. Jonathan Hale walked in and sat down across from him without asking permission, the way powerful men do, not rudely, simply with the certainty that they will not be turned away. He looked at Noah for a moment without speaking. Then he leaned forward slightly, his hands folded on the table between them. "I want to ask you something," he said, "and I want an honest answer, not a careful one." Noah nodded. "Why did you do that?" Hale asked. "You had no reason to. You didn't know me. It wasn't your job. You could have stepped back, called out a warning, let security handle it. Any of those choices, and nobody would have blamed you." He paused. "So why did you run toward it?" Noah was quiet for a moment. He looked at his hands. He thought about the years, the long, grinding, invisible years of holding everything together by himself. He thought about Emma at 17, folding away her dreams without complaint. He thought about every sleepless night and every exhausting morning and every shift he had worked in that restaurant, being invisible to people who never once thought to look at him. And then he looked up. "I saw someone who was about to die," Noah said quietly, "and I've spent my whole life watching things get taken away before they should be. My parents, my sister's future, things that mattered." He paused. "I couldn't watch another thing get taken if I had the chance to stop it." Hale was very still. "You have a sister," he said. It was not a question. Something in Noah's voice had made it obvious. "Her name is Emma," Noah said. "She's 23. She wanted to be a doctor. She gave that up after our parents died, so we could survive together." His voice remained even, but something in his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "She never complains. She never asks for anything. She just keeps showing up." Hale looked at him for a long time. He said nothing else that night. The following morning was a Thursday, gray and cool, the city already loud by 7. Jonathan Hale had worked an early shift and come home tired, still in her work coat, and was standing at the kitchen counter making coffee when there was a knock at the door. She opened it. Jonathan Hale stood in the hallway of their building,
No security detail, no photographer, no assistant. Just a man in a dark coat, holding nothing, standing quietly in a corridor that smelled
like old paint and someone else's cooking. He looked, Emma would later say, like a person who had made a decision and was at peace with it. "You must be Emma," he said. She stared at him. "I know who you are," she said carefully. "May I come in?" He sat at their small kitchen table, the one with the uneven leg that Noah had fixed twice with folded cardboard, and he listened. He asked about her studies, about what she had wanted, about where she had been accepted before life had redirected her so completely. Emma answered honestly, because there was something in his manner that made performance feel unnecessary. When she finished, he placed a card on the table between them. "Your enrollment is arranged," he said simply. "Full funding. Any program you choose, for as long as it takes you to finish." Emma looked at the card, then at him. Then she pressed both hands over her mouth, and her eyes filled slowly, quietly, with 4 years of something she had never allowed herself to say out loud. She did not sob, she simply sat with it for a moment, the enormous, sudden weight of a door reopening. Noah, who had appeared in the kitchen doorway, watched his sister's face and felt something loosen in his chest that had been wound tight for a very long time. For Noah, Hale made a separate offer, a place in his private leadership and security training program. Not charity, recognition. "I've spent 30 years looking for a particular quality in people," Hale told him. "Not talent, not ambition. I can find those anywhere." He looked at Noah steadily. "What I cannot find anywhere is someone who acts with courage when no one is watching, when nothing is guaranteed, when there is everything to lose and no reason given to care." He paused. "That is what you did last night, and I don't intend to waste it." Noah stood in the doorway of their apartment long after Hale's car had moved down the street and disappeared into the city. The October air came in through the window Emma had cracked open, and the sounds of the neighborhood settled around him. Distant traffic, someone's television, a child calling out from a floor below. He thought about his parents, about the rainy Tuesday evening that had divided his life into before and after. About every version of the future he had quietly bargained with himself over, every if and someday and one day that had kept him moving through the dark stretches. He had not saved Jonathan Hale's life because he expected anything in return. He had done it for the same reason he had always done hard things, because something in him could not stand to watch what could be saved go unsaved. But sometimes, in the quietest and most unexpected way, the world notices. Emma started medical school the following spring. On her first morning, she wore their mother's old watch on her left wrist and carried a photograph of both of them in her coat pocket. She touched it once before she walked through the front doors of the building. Then she walked through. And Noah, who had spent his entire life learning to notice everything, finally allowed himself to notice something new. That the life he had been building, slowly, invisibly, without recognition or applause, had always been carrying him somewhere worth arriving. Some lives are changed by wealth or luck or timing, but some lives are changed by a single moment when an ordinary person refuses to look away. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that quiet courage is still the most powerful thing in this world, please subscribe to Silent Paws and Brave Hearts. Every week we bring you stories of real human strength, loyalty, and love that the world too often overlooks. Hit that subscribe button, share this with someone who needs it today, and ring the bell so you never miss a story worth telling. Because the bravest people in the world are still out there, and every single one of them deserves to be seen. What this story teaches us. This story carries several layers of genuine value worth reflecting on. It teaches situational awareness, that paying close attention to your surroundings is not paranoia, but a life skill. Noah's ability to notice subtle wrongness in a room full of distraction is what made the difference between life and death. It speaks honestly about sibling sacrifice and the quiet devastation of deferred dreams, a reality millions of families understand deeply, particularly those who have lost parents young and been left to rebuild alone. It reminds us that courage is not reserved for soldiers or heroes in uniform. It lives in ordinary people who have been tested by hard circumstances and chosen again and again not to become bitter, but to remain present and responsible. It illustrates that true wealth is not measured in money, but in character, and that recognition, when given sincerely and without performance, can restore what grief and hardship quietly stole. And perhaps most importantly, it shows young viewers and older audiences alike that showing up faithfully, even when no one is watching, is never wasted. The life you build in silence still matters. It still leads somewhere. And sometimes, in the most unexpected moment, the world finally looks up and sees exactly who you have always been.